The two important questions in poker. First one is, if I bet, will a worse hand call? Will a better hand fold? That's question one. And the second one is, where does the profit in poker come from? Welcome to Bonesaw Poker. I'm Brad. Let's get into it. Okay, so we've got our table up. We're going to play and talk strategy at the same time, and we're going to do 20 minutes. We're going to try that out. See if people prefer it, don't prefer it. So after you leave a comment below, make sure you subscribe and like. Okay, so I have my notes written out this time, so hopefully I'm a little more on point than getting a little rambly sometimes. So that's the two big questions. And the first one is, if I bet, will a worse hand call? Will a better hand fold? And that should help you when you're putting out a bet, thinking about your bet size and what you're trying to accomplish. Like if you have the nuts on a really disconnected board, if you bet big, are you just going to scare away all worse hands and only keep in hands that, well, if you have the nuts, they don't beat you. Back in the 2000s, the theory was you wanted to win the pot as soon as you could. Bet big, it was Brunson Super System, Gus Hansen, and so on, where they're just betting big and putting tons of pressure on everybody trying to pick up the pot. Well, people over time learned how to beat that, is wait till you have a hand and just call them down and take them to the cleaners. So that's the first question. And the second question ties in to the first. And where does the profit come from? So the profit in poker comes from getting your strong hands to showdown and getting paid. This is where your biggest pots will come from. I mean, it's nice to pick up pots, steal the blinds, and so on, but really, when you have a big hand, you want to get it to showdown, and you want to get as much money as you can realistically get in there without scaring off your opponent. And you'll hear me say that quite a bit, like if I bet too large, and I'm like, well, I just lost my customer because I bet too big for a worse hand to call, and only better would it be calling me. Okay, so like bad aggros, there's good aggros and bad aggros, and I'll do a video on that at some point. So like bad aggros where they just keep piling money in, they get caught. Everybody sits around at the table just waiting to pick these guys off. They're three betting, they're triple barreling. It's like you can't have a big hand every time. So what happens is everybody just sits and waits. We're basically playing 7 against 1, even though it's not really what we're doing, but it is. And we're just waiting to pick the guy off. And it usually happens. So how you get your strong hands paid at showdown, it comes to streets of value, which I'll do a video on, and bet sizing. So, all right, we got pocket sixes here. We finally got a hand that we'll play. We'll raise first in. We'll call a small. There we go. Okay. So like on a disconnected board, say like a queen 8-4 rainbow, and you got pocket queens. Well, you pretty much have the board locked up at that point. I mean, really, what's left to call you? So then you have to decide whether you want to bet that and how much. Now that's a typical C-bet board, so you might want to try a C-bet. but you're not going to do bet, bet, bet and get paid. So you want to try to keep in anybody with an ace, anybody playing face cards. Somehow somebody's got a 6 in that mess, something like that. You're trying to keep them in. You start rifling money and they're just going to fold. And the other part of if I bet, will a worse hand call, will a better hand fold? There's an extra part to that, really. And it's, will a better hand, if I bet, a better hand not only won't fold, but they might let you know that you're beat. And you can start saving some chips by not triple barreling when they raise over the top of you. So, and that depends on board types too. Like, if you have a little more connected board, say Jack 10, 6, two of the same suit, and you have King Jack, and you come out and bet, and they go over the top. Well, they can have two pair, they can have sets, they can have ace Jack. I mean, they can have better hands. And if they're letting you know, not that you're folding there, but that you might be behind. All right, so bad passive players, also known as fish. I don't mean that in a derogatory term, but they stay in hands too long and pay off on the river too much. So these are the players that you need to target when you're playing. So if Jack 2, we're going to fold that. You want to keep them in the pot. So if you flop value, we're not trying to scare off the flush draw or scare off their pocket eights on a Jack 6, 4 flop, where passive players get way too sticky with a pocket pair because they're told how great pocket pairs are, even though they're staring at an overcard. That can sometimes get you paid. Another one is the flush draws. If you suspect they're on a flush, you want to bet enough to give them bad odds, but not bet too much that they won't call. So, like, say, let's go back to a Jack 8, 6, 2 clubs, and they check, you bet, they call. Okay. Now, some brick rolls out that's not a club. They check. And if you bet here, and they're just on the flush draw, they need 18%. So if you bet 3/4 pot or pot, you're pricing them enough that they would probably call, even though they're not getting the proper odds to call. Now, if you go pot bet or pot and a half, a good player would probably fold because they know what the pot odds are. But, a more fishier player has trouble letting go of that flush draw. So you got to kind of pick that bet size that keeps them to continue, and that does get a little tricky because if you go too big, they're going to feel priced out and they're not going to continue. And if they get there, they get there. That's just life. Okay. So in my notes, I have I'll just read it verbatim. Bad passive players stay in hands too long and pay off on the river too much. That's why you need to figure out who they are at your table and play more pots with them. Trading small pots with capable players isn't where the profit comes from. Target your players. And what you're looking to do when you're at the table, you can win money off of capable players, but it's going to be a cooler or a bad beat. They're not going to stay in hands too long They're better at folding out when they know their equity is pretty much not there. Because when you're playing in these games, you want to be putting money in when you have the advantage. And when they don't feel like they have the advantage, well, here's a heck of a flop. Well, we can't go around folding the royal flush draw. We're going to check that. Well, we got the flush. Redraw to the royal. Redraw to the straight flush. So, did we raise this? I don't. Yeah, we raise it. Okay. He's got a king. He missed his bet the first time. He's got the king. We have a 10. We have a blocker. We're going to just... Well, I hate to lose value here. I think he's got a king with something. No, he had the better flush. Okay. Huh. I wasn't factoring that. Wow. No. Flush over flush. He had the better one. So you need to target your players. When you're at the table, especially live, really pay attention to who's playing how. And if you think that you're up against that, pick out the capable players, the ones that you're going to have to be a little more careful with in pots, and pick out the players that are a little too splashy, a little too loose. Like they know how to play, but they don't play well. I mean, they've played a fair amount of poker, but they're just not real good. And try to get in more pots with them, because they're going to stay in pots too long. They're going to overvalue top pair. They're going to overvalue a pocket pair. They'll overpay for a flush. Where the capable players, they can read a board and realize when their top pair is just no good anymore, and they're not going to pay off. And their pocket sevens, pocket eights with a couple of face cards up there. It's harder to get money out of capable players. So when you're up against the capable players, you got to watch your bet sizing, that you're not pricing out a worse hand. And if you're bluffing, then you need to price up to try to get a better hand to fold. And what kind of better hand are we talking about? Like a pocket nines on a King Jack 6 board. A capable player is probably not going to stick around for two barrels on that board, unless a 10 or queen hit or a 9, where, I've seen fishier players where they just can't let that pocket pair go. So, and maybe we should have pulled up another table. But, and I don't know if I said it earlier, but getting your strong hands to showdown and getting them paid, that is where the big pots are made. That's where you're getting stacks in. Jack 3, we're going to fold that. So I think if you keep these two questions in mind while you're playing, I think that will help, because we are trying to get to showdown with our value hands and bring them along. We're going to fold 6-9 of hearts. And that also gets back to is we want to be putting money in the pot when we have the advantage. And sometimes you can bluff with the advantage. If you have position on a scary board, bad run out, I mean, you could still be in the driver's seat, per se, when you're putting money in as a bluff. Now, if you watch my solid poker basic strategy, that one we weren't bluffing yet, but later on when you add that in. All right, 2-10 of diamonds. Not much for hands tonight. Lost a little bit on that flush over flush. Not too bad. But a good check back on the river. Again, because what worse hand is calling us? Well, in that example, somebody with King 6, where they got trips. So we can get called by a king that didn't bow it up. So you could bet there. Jack 2. Got that again. Now, if you disagree with me where the profit comes in poker, put it in the comments, because there's a new belief that, well, I don't know about new, but that redlining is where the money's at. And if you don't know what redlining is if you have a poker tracker for when you're playing online, and it'll keep track of pots won, not making it a showdown in red, and pots won, getting to showdown, which is blue. So if you ever hear people talking about red line or blue line, that's what they're talking about. And the really aggressive players are saying that they want a big red line. They want to be picking up pots without ever making a showdown. And I'm saying is the blue line is really where you're going to pick up the bigger pots. And a good aggro could probably redline and make it, but the bad aggros, they're just going to keep winning small pots, winning small pots, winning small pots, lose a stack. Win small pot, win small pot, lose a stack. Because what they're doing is they're getting worse hands to fold and better hands to stay in. They're getting the exact opposite of what that question is. 8-5, not much going there. Yeah, a little too late to open up another table, so we'll ride this one out. Queen 10, it's a little loose in the small blind. We're going to let that go. And if you look back like at the 2000s where everybody was reading Doyle Brunson's Super System about being super aggressive, I mean, it worked well enough, but I think like GTO pretty much put an end to that because, and even before that, because people realized like, look, they can't have it all the time. I'm just going to have to hang in here and hold on. Okay, see if we can get some hands going here. 9-7, okay. King 3, this is a little loose on the button, but for one, we'll call it. We'll call it. I don't think he's going to go. I don't think that's one of these limp re-raises. Maybe. I've been really haven't been paying that close attention, so maybe it is. And we are done. In a multi-way pot, we're done. There's, again, on that, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for a pot that we would pretty much have to triple barrel, and we're never going to get a better hand to. If they got the strong hand, we're probably just dead there. Jack 8, we're going to fold that. All right, we've got about a minute left, so we'll play until we are big blind. We're going to sit off the big blind. Yeah, lost a little bit today. Not too bad on the flush over flush. The board being paired saved me. kind of notes? Got just okay. Yeah, should do better on my notes. We got this guy as a lag. All right, well, I think we're going to call it there. And any questions, put in the comments. Hopefully this was more on point and not as rambly as some of my other videos. Let me know on that one as well. And we'll go from there. That was 20 minutes of poker for Bonesaw Poker. This is Brad. And remember, everything you want is on the other side of fear.